The call came in the middle of a Tuesday that was supposed to be normal. No emergencies, no surprises. Just a quiet morning and a full calendar. Dylan Hartwell had been at his desk in a small office above a printing shop in Fort Collins, staring at a client report and trying to ignore the headache that always arrived when he didn't sleep enough. He was writing notes with the same steady hand he'd relied on in his previous life, back when his job involved investigation work and uncomfortable truths. His phone rang. The screen showed the elementary school's number. He answered immediately. "Mr. Hartwell?" A woman's voice said. "This is Nurse Patel at Ridgeview Elementary. Your daughter fainted during recess." Dylan stood so fast his chair scraped the floor. "Is she awake?" he asked. "She is," Nurse Patel said. "But I need you here as soon as possible. Before I tell you what happened next, subscribe the channel and let me know in the comments what time it is where you are watching from. It helps more than you know." Dylan didn't remember driving, only arriving. The front office smelled like copier paper and hand sanitizer. A secretary handed him a visitor badge. He clipped it to his shirt without looking at it and walked quickly down the hallway, every step too loud in his own ears. He found his daughter in the nurse's room sitting on the edge of a narrow cot. Maya, 8 years old. Small frame, big eyes. Her hair pulled back in a neat braid the way her mother insisted it should be. "Maya," Dylan said, dropping to one knee. She looked up, and for a second he saw fear, then something else that didn't belong in a child's face. Relief. "I'm okay," she whispered. Nurse Patel stood nearby with a clipboard. She looked calm, but her voice wasn't. Her blood sugar was low, she said. Her heart rate was elevated, and when we checked her weight against her last wellness screening, there's been a significant drop. Dylan blinked. "She eats at home." Nurse Patel hesitated. "Mr. Hartwell, the signs suggest malnutrition." The word landed like a slap. "Malnutrition?" Dylan repeated. "No, that can't be right. I'm not accusing anyone," Nurse Patel said carefully. "I'm telling you what her body is showing us." Dylan turned to Maya. "Sweetheart, have you been eating your lunch?" Maya's eyes flicked toward the door, then back to him. She didn't answer. That silence was louder than any confirmation. A teacher stepped in then. A woman with tired eyes and an expression that looked like she'd been holding something in for too long. "Mr. Hartwell," she said gently. "I'm Miss Keene. I teach Maya's class." Dylan stood, forcing his voice steady. "What's going on?" Miss Keene held up a small lunchbox covered in faded stickers. "We've noticed Maya's lunches have been inconsistent," she said. "At first we thought it was picky eating. Then we thought maybe she was giving food away. But today, after she fainted, I opened it before it went home." She placed the lunchbox on the counter and unzipped it. Inside was a single rice cake in a plastic bag and a napkin folded neatly beside it. No fruit, no sandwich, no snacks, no note, just emptiness, presented like a plan. Dylan stared at it, throat tightening. "That's not," he started. He stopped. Because it was exactly like Maya's mother, Serena, to pack something that looked clean and disciplined. The way she talked about wellness lately, the way she'd been watching videos late at night with the volume turned low. Dylan's voice came out softer. "How long has it been like this?" Miss Keene exhaled. "A few months. Sometimes there's more, sometimes there's less. But it's been trending downward." Nurse Patel watched him closely. "Has Maya been sick recently?" "No," Dylan said automatically. Then he remembered the small things. Maya saying she wasn't hungry at dinner. Maya pushing food around her plate. Maya drinking water and insisting she was fine. Dylan turned back to his daughter and lowered his voice. "Maya, why didn't you tell me?" Maya's eyes filled, but she didn't cry. "She said not to," Maya whispered. "Who said not to?" Maya swallowed. "Mom." Dylan's jaw tightened. "What did she say?" he asked gently. Maya hesitated, then spoke like she was repeating a rule she had memorized. "She said if I tell, people will take me away, and you'll be in trouble." Dylan's stomach dropped. That wasn't normal parenting. That was control. He looked at the lunchbox again, then at the nurse, then at the teacher. And in that moment, Dylan understood something that made his hands go cold. This wasn't neglect. It was intentional. He signed a release form with a shaking pen, thanked the staff, and carried Maya out of the building himself, her small hand locked tightly in his. In the parking lot, he strapped her into the car seat booster and sat behind the wheel without starting the engine. His phone showed 3 missed messages from Serena, all cheerful, all casual, as if the day was ordinary. Dylan stared at the screen and realized he didn't just need answers. He needed proof, because whoever could convince a child to stay quiet while starving her had already crossed a line that didn't uncross. And the moment Dylan started the car, he wasn't driving home to talk. He was driving home to see what had really been happening right in front of him. Dylan did not confront Serena that afternoon. He wanted to. Every instinct in him demanded it, but instinct had cost him before. Instead, he drove home in silence, Maya quiet in the back seat, staring out the window as if nothing unusual had happened. When they pulled into the driveway of their 2-story house in suburban Fort Collins, everything looked exactly the same as it had that morning. Trimmed hedges, clean porch, wind chimes barely moving in the breeze. Serena stood at the kitchen counter when they walked in. She turned with a soft smile. "Oh good, you got her. The nurse called me too. They overreact to everything." Dylan studied her carefully. Serena looked composed, perfect posture, athletic build, hair pulled into a sleek bun. She wore fitted workout clothes and held a green smoothie in one hand. "Overreact?" Dylan asked evenly. "She probably skipped breakfast," Serena replied. "You know how dramatic kids can be." Maya walked past both of them without speaking and went upstairs. That alone told Dylan more than any explanation could. He set the lunchbox on the counter. Serena glanced at it. "What?" Dylan unzipped it slowly. The single rice cake lay inside like evidence. Serena's expression did not shift. "She didn't eat the rest," she said. "There wasn't any rest," Dylan replied. Serena crossed her arms. "We're teaching her discipline, healthy habits. You wouldn't understand." Dylan kept his voice level. "Healthy habits don't cause fainting." Serena's eyes hardened slightly. "Doctors say children overeat constantly. Childhood obesity is an epidemic." "She's 8, Dylan said quietly. Serena set the smoothie down. "Exactly. This is when habits form." Dylan noticed something then. There was no concern in her voice, only justification. That night at dinner, Serena served grilled chicken and steamed vegetables. Small portions, meticulously arranged. Maya barely touched her plate. "Finish it," Serena said sharply. Maya's fork froze. Dylan leaned forward. "She fainted today. She fainted because she's weak," Serena snapped. "And she's weak because she lacks structure." Silence fell between them. Dylan watched his daughter's shoulders fold inward. He had seen that posture before, in interrogation room, in witnesses who had learned that speaking made things worse. After dinner, when Serena went upstairs to shower, Dylan quietly opened the pantry. What he found unsettled him. There was food, plenty of it. Protein bars, yogurt, bread, fruit, but nearly everything was labeled. Sticky notes marked with calorie counts. Certain shelves were marked approved. Others were labeled restricted. He opened the refrigerator. Maya's name appeared on containers portioned out with precision. Exact gram measurements written in black marker. This was not neglect. This was control masked as care. Later that night, Dylan knocked gently on Maya's bedroom door. "Can I come in?" She nodded. Her room was tidy, too tidy. He sat beside her on the bed. "Maya," he said softly, "I need you to tell me the truth. Are you hungry during the day?" She stared at her hands. "Sometimes," she whispered. "What happens if you say that?" She says hunger is just a feeling, and feelings pass. Dylan swallowed. "And if you eat something extra?" Maya hesitated. She checks. "Checks what?" "My lunchbox. My backpack. Sometimes my mouth." Dylan's chest tightened. "Does she tell you not to tell me?" Maya nodded. "She says you don't understand nutrition. She says if I tell, people will think she's a bad mom and they'll take me away." Dylan closed his eyes briefly. This was not about health. This was about fear. And fear was powerful when planted early. The next morning, Dylan made breakfast himself. Pancakes, eggs, fruit. Serena stood in the doorway watching. "That's excessive," she said flatly. Dylan ignored her and placed the plate in front of Maya. "Eat until you're full," he said gently. Maya looked from him to her mother. Serena's jaw tightened. "Fine," she said after a long pause. Indulge her. Dylan stayed seated until Maya finished every bite. Serena left for the gym shortly after. The moment the front door closed, Dylan pulled out his phone. He called a pediatric specialist he had worked with years earlier during a consulting case. He explained everything carefully. The fainting, the weight loss, the restricted lunches. There was a long pause on the other end. That pattern, the specialist said finally, can indicate coercive control. It's a form of psychological abuse. If it continues, it escalates. Dylan stared at the staircase leading upstairs. He thought about the precision of the lunch portions, the calorie labels, the warnings not to tell, and something else. Serena had recently started spending time with someone new, a man named Grant Elwood. Dylan had met him once. Charming, smooth, obsessed with biohacking, extreme diets, control. Grant had once said something that lingered. Discipline is love in its purest form. Dylan now wondered whose idea this had really been. That afternoon, when Serena returned home, she seemed unusually upbeat. She mentioned casually that Grant would be stopping by later. Dylan nodded, expression neutral. But inside, something had shifted. He was no longer asking whether something was wrong. He was asking how far it had already gone, because what looked like a strict diet could be something else entirely. And the kind of people who hide harm behind wellness language rarely stop at food. That night, Dylan lay awake listening to the house settle around him. Maya slept down the hall. Serena's phone buzzed once in the darkness. A message. She didn't realize Dylan saw the name on the screen, Grant, and the message preview that glowed briefly before disappearing. Stick to the plan. She'll adjust. Dylan stared at the ceiling. He had the fainting. He had the lunchbox. Now he had confirmation that this was coordinated, and coordination meant intent. By morning, Dylan would no longer be reacting. He would be preparing. Because when control is this deliberate, it rarely stays contained to one part of a child's life. And Dylan had a feeling that the food was only the beginning. Dylan did not sleep much that night. He lay still beside Serena, listening to the rhythm of her breathing, steady and unbothered, while his own mind replayed every detail from the last 3 months. The calorie labels, the rice cake, the message, stick to the plan, she'll adjust. At dawn, he was already awake. Serena left early for what she called a wellness consult. She kissed Maya on the forehead lightly and reminded her, remember your portions. Dylan watched that word settle over his daughter like a rule carved in stone. After Serena's car pulled out of the driveway, Dylan moved quickly. He checked the pantry again, this time photographing every labeled container. He opened Serena's laptop, which she rarely logged out of, and searched her browsing history. Dozens of articles appeared. Child optimization through caloric discipline, reshaping behavioral compliance with controlled nutrition, preventing weakness through structured intake. Then something more disturbing, a private online forum. The posts were hidden behind a login, but notification previews were visible. Grant's name appeared repeatedly. One thread subject line read, Case Study, Early Conditioning Success. Dylan felt a cold clarity take hold. This was not casual dieting. It was ideology. By mid-morning, he drove Maya to a pediatric clinic, recommended by the specialist he'd called. The doctor, Dr. Hargrove, was in his early 50s. Soft-spoken, methodical. He examined Maya thoroughly, measured weight, blood pressure, reflexes. He asked gentle questions. Do you ever feel dizzy? Do you feel afraid to eat? Does anyone watch you when you eat? Maya answered carefully. Yes. Sometimes. Yes. Dr. Hargrove removed his glasses and leaned back in his chair. This is not a nutritional preference issue, he said quietly. This is sustained caloric restriction inconsistent with her age and growth pattern. Dylan nodded slowly. Is it dangerous? He asked. It already is, the doctor replied. If it continues, it could lead to organ strain, cognitive impairment, hormonal disruption. Dylan glanced at Maya. She was tracing the edge of the examination table paper with her finger, silent. How long would this take to reverse? Dylan asked. With proper intervention? Dr. Hargrove paused. Weeks for stabilization, months for full recovery, and emotional effects may last longer. Emotional effects. Dylan understood that better than most. On the drive home, Maya spoke quietly from the back seat. "Are you mad?" she asked. "At you?" Dylan's voice softened. "Never. At Mom?" Dylan took a breath. "I'm concerned," he said carefully. Maya went quiet again. That afternoon Grant arrived. He entered the house with easy familiarity, carrying a gym bag and wearing a confident smile. "Dylan," he said smoothly, "heard about the fainting. Kids these days process sugar weirdly." Dylan stood in the kitchen doorway. "She wasn't lacking sugar," he said evenly. "She was lacking food." Grant chuckled lightly. "Food is relative. Discipline builds resilience." Serena joined them, crossing her arms. "We're trying to build strength," she said. "You're overreacting." Dylan looked at both of them carefully. "Strength doesn't involve fear," he said. Grant's smile tightened just slightly. "You're emotional," Grant replied, "which is understandable. But optimization requires discomfort." Optimization. There it was again. Dylan's gaze shifted to Serena. "Did you consult a pediatrician before changing her diet?" Serena hesitated. Grant answered instead. "Doctors push outdated models," he said. "We follow data." Dylan noticed something else now. Grant did most of the talking. Serena nodded along. Later that evening, Dylan asked Maya to show him where she kept her school backpack. Inside, beneath her notebooks, he found a folded paper. It was a chart, a daily intake log, calories recorded, water ounces tallied, behavior notes written in tidy handwriting. At the bottom of each page, a signature, Serena's, and sometimes Grant's. Dylan sat on the edge of the bed, the chart trembling slightly in his hands. He had what he needed now: medical documentation, photographs, the intake logs. But he also knew something else. People who believe they are improving a child rarely admit wrongdoing. They escalate. That night, after Grant left, Serena confronted him. "You went behind my back," she said coldly. "I took her to a doctor," Dylan replied. "You're undermining me. I'm protecting her." Serena's expression shifted from defensive to furious. "You've always thought you're smarter than everyone," she said. "You think you see patterns others don't." Dylan held her gaze. "I do," he said quietly. She stepped closer. "You're going to regret this." The threat was soft, controlled, calculated. Dylan did not respond. Instead, he walked past her and locked the door behind him. Upstairs, Maya slept curled tightly under her blanket. He sat beside her bed long after midnight. Control disguised as care. Discipline framed as love. Fear marketed as improvement. Dylan had seen tactics like this before. Not in homes, in operations. And operations always had layers. He suspected the food was only the visible part, because no one builds charts and forums and structured plans for something that small. Somewhere beneath the rice cakes and calorie counts, there was a deeper agenda, and Dylan had the uneasy sense that the next thing he uncovered would not just be about hunger, it would be about power. The escalation came faster than Dylan expected. The next morning, Serena did not pack a lunch at all. Instead, she placed a sealed container into Maya's backpack and zipped it shut before Dylan could look inside. "I've adjusted the plan," she said calmly. "Since you think I'm reckless." Dylan held her gaze. "I'm taking her to school today. That won't be necessary." It wasn't a request. For a brief second, something dangerous flashed behind Serena's eyes. Not anger, not panic, possession. Maya stood between them, backpack straps tight in her fists. Dylan crouched beside her. "We're going together," he said gently. Serena's jaw clenched, but she said nothing. At school, Dylan walked Maya directly into the front office and requested to speak with Miss Keene and Nurse Patel privately. He handed them copies of Dr. Hargrove's report, photographs of the pantry labels and the intake logs. Both women read in silence. Nurse Patel exhaled slowly. "This changes everything." Miss Keene nodded. "We suspected something, but this shows intent." Intent. That word mattered. By noon, a formal report had been filed with Child Protective Services. Dylan didn't celebrate it. He understood the weight of that action. Investigations cut both ways. When he returned home that afternoon, Serena was waiting. Her phone was on the counter. Her face was calm in a way that felt rehearsed. "They called me," she said. "I assumed they would. You involved the state," she replied evenly. Over a diet, Dylan didn't raise his voice. Over starvation, Serena leaned forward slightly. You're overreacting because you're insecure. Insecure? You've always needed to feel superior. This is just another way to control the narrative. Dylan let the accusation pass. He had heard variations of it before. What unsettled him more was what came next. Grant stepped into the kitchen. He had not knocked. I told you he'd escalate, Grant said calmly to Serena. Dylan felt a quiet shift in the room. Grant's tone was no longer smooth. It was irritated. You're meddling in something you don't understand, Grant continued, turning to Dylan. The program is designed carefully. Controlled exposure to scarcity builds resilience. She's 8, Dylan said. Grant shrugged. Which is why it works. The admission was almost casual. Dylan's eyes narrowed. Program? Serena shot Grant a warning look, but it was too late. Grant sighed and spoke as if explaining something obvious. We run workshops, he said, for parents who want disciplined children, controlled nutrition, behavioral compliance, structured emotional detachment. Dylan felt his stomach tighten. You're testing this on her. Grant smiled faintly. Testing is a crude word. Serena added quickly, it's a methodology. Dylan's voice remained level. How many other children? Grant hesitated for the first time. That's not your concern. It was exactly his concern. That night, after Serena and Grant left for what they called a strategy meeting, Dylan searched the home office. He found binders, detailed charts, progress tracking, parent testimonials. Some were enthusiastic, others were defensive. One document stopped him cold. A proposal draft. Phase 2. External application trial. The trial referenced collaboration with a private educational group in another county. It outlined performance metrics tied to caloric restriction compliance and emotional suppression. Maya's initials appeared in one column. Dylan's hands went cold. This was no longer misguided parenting. It was experimentation. He photographed everything, every page, every signature. Then he placed the binders exactly where he found them. The next morning, Child Protective Services arrived unannounced. Serena greeted them with controlled warmth. Grant was not present. The caseworker, a woman in her 40s named Laura Finch, asked to speak with Maya alone. Dylan watched from the hallway. He could hear only fragments. Do you feel safe? Are you ever afraid? Who checks your lunch? Maya's voice was small, but steady. Yes, sometimes, Mom does. When Laura Finch stepped back into the hallway, her expression was firm. We'll be implementing a temporary protective measure, she said. Serena's composure cracked for the first time. You can't, she snapped. This is ridiculous. It's precautionary, Laura replied calmly. Within hours, an emergency order granted Dylan temporary full custody pending investigation. Serena stared at him like he had betrayed her. You think you've won, she said quietly. Dylan shook his head. This isn't about winning. Grant called that evening. His voice was colder now. You're dismantling something bigger than you understand. Dylan's reply was simple. If it harms children, it deserves dismantling. Silence stretched across the line. You don't know who you're interfering with, Grant said softly. Dylan ended the call without responding. That night, Maya ate a full dinner. Slowly, carefully. She looked uncertain, as if expecting correction. There's no chart, Dylan told her gently. Just eat. Tears slipped down her face. Not dramatic. Relieved. As she slept, Dylan sat at the kitchen table reviewing the evidence again. The proposal draft, the intake logs, the messages. He understood now why Serena had been so defensive. Because if this program expanded, Maya would not have been the last child shaped by it. And people who build systems like that rarely stop voluntarily. Dylan leaned back in his chair. The house finally quiet. This had started with a fainting spell, but it was ending in something far larger. Because once institutions became involved, and documentation reached beyond one home, what had been hidden behind wellness language would not stay private for long. And when exposure spreads, it does not limit itself to one family. The investigation moved faster than anyone expected. What began as a school report over fainting and malnutrition quickly widened into something far more structured. Child Protective Services flagged the documentation Dylan had provided. The intake logs were copied. The proposal drafts were forwarded. The forum connections were traced. Within a week, the program Grant had described so casually was no longer theoretical. It was being reviewed. Serena was ordered to attend supervised visitation sessions only. Grant was formally interviewed. The more investigators examined the materials, the clearer the pattern became. Several families across 2 counties had implemented similar dietary discipline systems. Some children had shown weight suppression. Others had reported fear-based compliance. One parent admitted the idea came from a private seminar, Grant Elwood's seminar. The language in the seminar outline matched the proposal Dylan had found nearly word for word: controlled scarcity, emotional detachment training, compliance reinforcement. The terminology sounded clinical, but the outcomes did not. Maya stayed with Dylan full-time. The first weeks were not easy. Her body had to readjust. Her metabolism was unstable. She experienced mood swings, headaches, and fatigue. Dr. Hargrove monitored her carefully. "She's recovering," he said after the 3rd appointment. "Her numbers are improving, but emotional patterns take longer." Dylan understood that part deeply. Every meal became an exercise in rebuilding trust. "Eat until you're comfortable," he would say. "Not until full, not until finished, just comfortable." At first, Maya asked permission before every bite. "Is this too much?" "No," Dylan would answer gently. "Your body decides." Slowly, the fear began to loosen. Serena attempted to fight the custody order. She hired an attorney and claimed Dylan had exaggerated the situation. But the documented calorie charts and forum evidence weakened her case. Grant's position collapsed more dramatically. During a formal review, investigators discovered that he had been charging families consulting fees under a non-licensed behavioral optimization service. Worse, internal emails showed discussions about publishing the program as a marketable discipline framework. Maya's intake logs had been used as a sample success model. That detail shifted everything. The program was no longer framed as misguided parenting. It became commercial exploitation of children. Grant was charged with practicing unlicensed behavioral intervention and endangerment-related violations. Civil suits followed from other families. Serena was not charged criminally, but the court deemed her judgment compromised under external influence. Her visitation rights remained supervised. The day the final custody ruling was signed, Dylan sat alone in his car outside the courthouse for a long time. He did not feel victorious. He felt steady. Maya was 8 years old. She had lost trust in food before she lost trust in people. Now, she was learning both could return. One evening, months later, she sat at the kitchen table finishing a bowl of pasta. She paused halfway through and looked up. "Am I allowed seconds?" she asked. Dylan smiled gently. "You don't need permission to grow." She thought about that. Then she stood, walked to the stove, and served herself more. It was a small act, but it meant everything. Serena attended counseling sessions as required by the court. Reports indicated gradual improvement, though trust between her and Maya would take time. Grant's seminars dissolved. His website went offline. The forum disappeared. The families who had participated were required to attend educational intervention sessions. What had been framed as elite discipline training was formally categorized as harmful practice. The language shifted publicly. Resilience became restriction. Optimization became control. Compliance became fear. Dylan returned to part-time investigative consulting work months later, careful to balance time at home. He installed no charts. He created no systems. He stocked the pantry fully. The sticky notes disappeared. One afternoon, Maya came home from school holding a permission slip. "Can I bring cupcakes for my birthday?" she asked cautiously. Dylan looked at her and nodded. "As many as you want." She grinned, wide and free. The fainting episode that began everything felt distant now. But Dylan never forgot it, because it had not been a collapse from weakness. It had been a signal, a body refusing to cooperate with control. And sometimes, that refusal is the first step toward truth. That night, after Maya fell asleep, Dylan stood in the quiet kitchen and opened the pantry door. No labels, no restrictions, just food, simple, available. He closed it gently and turned off the light. The house felt different now, not optimized, not structured, safe. And if you've been listening this far, subscribe to the channel and let me know in the comments what time it is where you're watching from. It helps more than you know.